welcome to This Week in Finally Game Music, and this time it's episode 127 on the thematic of vocal tracks. It's been a long time since we did one of these before, all the way back to episode 54, where we just called Musik med sången. So basically there's just meaning that what's the Swedish words for tracks with vocals in them. So yeah, this week I've been researching a little bit and I actually were super intrigued by the thematic, but also finding out what I found out. It's going to be interesting to talk about these tracks, most from my perspective. The more information I got towards these composers and the music themselves. There are some that I didn't know about, but it's the usual. I picked 2 tracks out and we have 2 requested tracks this week. And we're starting out this week with one of these requested tracks, all due to because it is an opening. So it's super exciting to go ahead, and I've been listening to this track like a madman, so I hope you enjoy this starting song. It's from Mary Skelter Nightmares. It's the opening theme, and let's try and not botch this name, but it's Arakajime Una Watreta Bokurano Ballad, and it was a requested song from our awesome listener, Olol. There are very rare occasions where I actually play the full song, so just enjoy the full thematic of this opening intro. This was from the Mary Skelter Nightmare game. This was the opening track called Arikajime Ushinawarate Bokurano Ballad. So I think I botched it even more before saying it right now, so maybe I got some time to actually repeat it over and over again while listening to this one. But first of all, it's so freaking great. I really love, first of all, I'm a sucker when it comes to anime. And this intro, it looks like an anime game. I'm not entirely sure what it is specifically. It looks to be some sort of RPG game, since I have never heard about this game before, and Olol usually just requests songs from all these unknown games, for me at least. Maybe some of you guys know which this game is and have played it for many hours, I don't know. But first of all, I'm a sucker for anime, and it has this really nice, neat, rocky thematic to it as well, and I really enjoy the adrenaline and the tempo, and just this opening theme is just BAM! In the face, and I just love it! So good! So I've been listening to this track over and over again ever since Ola requested this one. I couldn't just let it go, and I know I will keep listening to this track as well. So, when it comes to this composition for this specific song, it was made by the Japanese guy Tomoyoshi Endo, or P, or it's P as in the small vegetable, P-E-A, not the other thing, or Endo for short. And he's Endo from the band Geeks, from what I understand it, because they usually have these kind of preference for Geeks, so I'm not sure if it's a band or something. When I'm just searching Geeks, you can just guess what's happening. But yeah, it seems like Endo is playing guitar and have vocals in different bands. And just Geeks was not represented by the information when I was looking around. But when it comes to this entire soundtrack, we have multiple Japanese composers. We have Toshimichi Isoe, Yo Oyama, Kazune Ogihara, Yoshihiro Kawagoe, and Shintaro Jinbo. And the game, it was composed by the Japanese company Compile Heart. And the game, it was released initially for the PS Vita in the US 2017, but the game were also released through Steam, and this happened 2018. So when it comes to the different composers here, so we start out with the first one named Endo, which made the intro here. He doesn't have many other games in his credit list, what I could find, and it was kind of hard because the usual sources I go to didn't have much information about any of the composers on this soundtrack. So it's super interesting going and digging little bit deeper, but from what I could find, he has worked on a lot of commercial music in Japan, both for anime series and movies specifically, but then also commercials. So that was kind of interesting. I didn't find anything specific that I think has a larger spread, more than the Tales of, I think it was Symphonies animation series that they have. I never seen that one myself, so I'm a little bit unsure on the specifications here. But when going on to the next one, Toshimichi here, he has worked on multiple soundtracks, and he started way back in 1991 with the Japanese exclusive game Gildeen. It's Gdleen. I don't know exactly if it's Godlin or something like that. Godling? I don't know. But during his career, he has worked on different companies as the composer, and seem to have settled for Compile Hearts since 2013. When he did the ending song for the game Sorcery Saga, Curse of the Great Curry God. And you need to keep this Curry God in mind right now, because we'll be going through that one a couple of times for the rest of the composers here. But the last game that Toshimichi worked on was the music for Mary Skelter 2, which was released in 2019. Heading over to the third composer here, Yo, he did some similar trip within Compile Heart, but he started a little bit later than Toshimichi, as he started back in 2000 with his first game being Guitar Freaks Append the Second Mix. And like Toshimichi, Yo's first game at Compile Heart was this Curry God game, and he has been working ever since, so the last game there was also Mary Skelter 2. The fourth composer here, Kazune, did not have that much of a huge credit list. It's still some games, but it's 6 games in total. And her first soundtrack were for the game Etrian Odyssey 2, Untold the Fafnir Night back in 2015. But when it comes to Kazune, it looks more that she's been working more as a musician for soundtracks rather than the composer. Though, for Etrian, I just named, and for Mary Skelter Nightmares and Mary Skelter 2, she had worked on or with the background music initially. So when it comes to her latest released game, it was the game 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim, that released then back in 2019. Now we're getting closer to the end of these composers, but we still have 2 more to go here. So Yoshihiro, this person is not well versed within video games, but he have worked on a whole lot of other music, a little bit like Toshimichi here, as he has worked on a lot of music for anime series and movies. And going through his list, even though it's short, it's only 3 games I could find. His first game was the Fairy Fencer F, which was released back in 2014, and then following up with Mary Skelter Nightmares in 2017. And his latest released, just like the other ones, were Mary Skelter 2. And the last composer, Shintaro here, is kind of interesting because they have a little bit different spelling when you're searching around, so you can find him on different kind of names. But apparently Shintaro is more known as Shintaro Jimbo instead of Jinbo. And I didn't make sense of it, but looking around you found so much more when you start searching for Shintaro Jimbo. But he started his career with the game Clandun X2, a game which both Yo and Toshimichi worked on as well. The game was released back in 2012, and since then Shintaro has worked on the Curry God that followed up with only 3 more games. We have Moiron, Chronicles back in 2014, and then Monster Monpiece, and then Merry Skelter Nightmares, I'm sorry, back in 2017. It's so interesting going through this and having so many different composers that seems to have their hands a little bit everywhere. It seems more like a majority of these guys have worked more as a freelancer rather than a house composer, so to speak. We have 3 composers here out of the 5 or 6 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 composers that basically worked on a lot of Compile Hearts games, but we still have 2 that did not work as much. And we have one of these 3 that also worked a lot on the side. Maybe they had their own projects like Endo did and so on. So it's super interesting, and I really, really love this track. So thank you so much, Olol, for requesting this one. So following this up, I found it really hard trying to have something that follow up so strong as the first song did. But I think I picked something that I find at least very interesting. So let's go with Killer Instinct, Orchid. A little bit more to the ambient kind of way, but it kind of has a well-rounded percussion here going on. So yeah, it's not much more into this track. This is kind of it. You listen to a majority of the track already, and she keeps repeating the killer, yeah, all the time. So when it comes to the music for Killer Instinct here, before we're going in on more specifics, because I have more as we move along here. So the music here was composed by the British Robin Beanland, and together with the Brit Graham Norgate. I'm a little bit unsure if it's Graham or something like that, because it's Graeme. So Graham, something like that. I'm sorry if I'm watching it, if you're ever listening to this podcast. But they together they made this entire soundtrack for Killer Instinct. And the game, it was developed by the British company Rare and was released on arcade first of all, 1994 in the US. And the game was also released the year after on both Super Nintendo and Game Boy. In this track we hear Faye Newborough, which was originally the voice for the Black Orchid, which is the character only usually called Orchid. So when it comes to this character, Black Orchid is actually her full name. And in the soundtrack for the Killer Instinct, or the Killer Instinct Killer Cuts, you can hear Faye's voice in 2 of these soundtracks. We have the first one, which is the KI, Killer Instinct Feeling, and you hear her voice also in the following up track, which is called The Way You Move. So when it comes to the KI Feeling, which is basically Orchid's stage then remixed. So it's a little bit more remixed out of what we hear right now. And when it comes to The Way You Move, this soundtrack or this song was not present within the game. It was just released through the Killer Cut CD, which followed with the SNES game in the beginning. We've talked about Robin before, and that was because we talked about the Donkey Kong Country music, but also a little bit of the Banjo-Kazooie music as well, as we touched it a little bit here and there. So when it comes to Robin, there's nothing new that he released ever since then so far. So we're looking forward for more to come when it comes to Robin here. But Graham is a new composer I haven't heard of before, so I had to do a little bit more digging to this one. And we can find into, when we're looking at his credits, so to speak, we can find Killer Instinct is actually his first work professionally shown. Also, ever since then, he has been a little bit here and there and a little bit everywhere, I would say, to say the least. But he did work at Rare for quite some time, all the way back to 1999. So that's a bit of, let's see, how many years is it? Because I did not calculate this one, so it's 5 years. Just looking at the release date here for the arcade, at least. It's good that I have all the numbers, it's just that I haven't written down each and every number all the time. But it worked there for 5 years, where his last work at Rare were for the game Jet Force Gemini. Then he jumped over to work for the British studio Free Radical Design, which is most commonly known for the Timesplitter series. Following up that, he worked some time at Crytek's British studio, where he worked on all 3 or 4 and remakes and such for the Crysis games, which is kind of interesting. I only played the first games, or the first game. I haven't played the 2 and the third one, but I know the third one has a bow, so that's like 2 thumbs up for me. So, yeah. But when it comes to the latest game he released the ambience tracks for the game Tamarin, which was released back in 2019. So when it comes to the soundtrack for Killer Instinct, it's kind of interesting, because looking at the original Killer Instinct, which was released for the Super Nintendo, Game Boy, and the arcade, Robin and Graham worked together for the soundtrack for that one. We followed up with Killer Instinct 2, and I do believe Robin worked for that one as well. But then later, after the years for the Killer Instinct, it took a lot of years until we got the remake, which basically kind of revamped the whole Killer Instinct thing for the fighting games. Because when we got the new soundtrack and new everything with the new Killer Instinct that initially released back in 2013, it was actually made by Mick Gordon, which you guys might know is most known for the Doom games today. So that's really interesting, kind of seeing how Robin and Graham's music kind of was interpreted by another composer, because it would have been interesting to kind of see how the music would have sounded like if somebody just remixed them. But it's super interesting, and I really like. When I grew up, I think Killer Instinct was one of those games I never really owned, but I played it a lot at my friends' places. And I found it always so interesting, because usually when you buy Super Nintendo games, most of these cartridges are just gray, boring, and might have a really good-looking kind of a label on them. But when it came to Killer Instinct, this cartridge was entirely black, and you have one of the characters looking awesome on the front of it. And I know that I was so interested in having this game, and I really, for some reason, when it comes to me, I'm not so fond of robots and sci-fi and such, but when it comes to Killer Instinct and some of the labels for Super Nintendo games, I think you might know which ones. There are some really cool looking ones that actually have robots on them, and I was super interested in getting as well. Killer Instinct was one of these games, but we never really got that far, so I could have actually acquired that game. But I did acquire this game with the original soundtrack when I was older now, so I'm super happy to actually own this game and be able to take out the CD and put it into the CD player and just enjoy it. And it's so much interesting when you're looking from a collector's perspective. Even though it says that the soundtrack is also included into this box, people are usually selling it called Complete in Box, SIB for short. And they usually sell it even though the soundtrack is missing. And in my opinion, as a collector, I'm not so sure about that. I wouldn't say it is complete in the box, because material are missing from the box itself, especially when it says included. So I'm a little bit unsure there about these kind of things, but that's just me talking as a collector. And I really, as I said before, I really found it interesting, because I do not remember any soundtracks in Killer Instinct that had voices in them, but apparently going through it and reading more and more about it, it was super interesting getting to know Faye a little bit more, as Faye is also making the voice for Black Orchid in the earlier games, but initially does the voices for the Orchid tracks, because later on in the series, Orchid gets another voice actor to do her voice. So Faye is more commonly known towards the soundtracks for Orchid when she's doing the voice today. And she even worked with her voice for the remake as well in 2013. So it was super interesting. Just checking out the soundtrack for it, you will see how amazing she kind of works with it and kind of gives a well-rounded kind of personality towards Orchid, and I really, really love that one. Kind of everything goes around itself, so to speak. But I liked the fighting game Killer Instinct nonetheless. Yeah, the next song out is going to be a requested song as per usual. And this is a request from Karuchi, and he did write quite a long comment here, but I'm just going to read the request part of this one. So he had 2 requests for the next episode. He had Mango Tango Neo Jungle from Double Dragon Neo, and it is an awesome song and will probably get request. It's a must in any vocal game episode, or game music episode, sorry. The whole soundtrack is among the best of Jake Kaufman has ever made, and if that song is already taken, and it should be, my next one is Prayer, sung by Hayley Westenra, which was the Wii music theme for the Konami's game Endless Ocean. It is beautiful, serene song that always had me halting a moment before even starting up the game. It also made me want to buy Westenra's CDs. She has a fantastic voice. So this was a really interesting pick, and I really liked the pick as well. So we're going to listen to the first requested song, and we're not going to listen to both, sadly, even though I very much would have liked that. But only one request per person, I would say. So here's Double Dragon Neo, Mango Tango Neo. Mango Tango Neon from the Double Dragon Neon game, requested by Karuchi. And I really enjoy this song as well. I won't be playing the whole song because even though it's amazing, it's really long as well. And we know we can't be listening for game music all day. We gotta listen to me as well, I guess, right? Yeah, because we want to educate ourselves into these like composers and everything basically, which I usually, yeah, you know. That's what I'm putting on the table here. So, shown as the audio guy in this credits, we have the American, or legend maybe for some already, because I really do enjoy, I would say legend here, Jake Kaufman. So, when it comes to this game, Jake both composed the entire soundtrack and he wrote the lyrics for all the songs. And he actually uses his own voice in this game as he's doing some voice acting for the game character known as Warlock. When it comes to me, I haven't played this game at all. I've heard it's a little bit not so great, but not too good either. So it's a little bit mix and mash from what I've heard. So this is kind of the reason why I haven't played this game. But I do know Double Dragon overall, so yeah, I know what I'm in for if I would take this up. But listening to this amazing soundtrack, I guess I'm gonna pick it up, you know? But the game, at least, was developed by the American studio Way Forward, and it was released for the Xbox 360, first through the Xbox Live Arcade, and also we have for the PS4 and the PS3 for the PSN back in 2012. The game later got a port to the PC in 2014, and had a release last year on the Nintendo Switch. Jake. This name comes up so often in this podcast that I think it is hard to avoid this man because all the amazing music that he works on, first of all. But we're going back and forth to Jake more than enough, so he's hardly able to release new content or new games with his music in before we taking up some of his music again in this podcast. So it's super exciting and interesting. But when we're back at this, because we haven't done any new podcast and talked about Jake in a while, all the way from me having to take a break from the podcast, but also when I had to leave my microphone at service because it did not take up any recording of my voice. Kind of hard to make a podcast when you can't record your own voice. Kind of defines that it's not working. But now that we're back and we're coming back to Jake, we can actually see that we have one new game that got released. So usually when we're going back, we don't have anything to say, but this time we actually do. And when it comes to the latest game that he has been working on, it was actually for the game Vitamin Connection that got released last year. And it released on multiple platforms there as well. So just check it out, Vitamin Connections. Most likely it has amazing music as well, just like most of the other games that he had worked on. But yeah, I don't have that much to say about Double Dragon. I really like the games before at least. I haven't played each and every one of them, but I think Double Dragon is a really solid game, beat 'em up game when it comes to it. It really holds up to other beat 'em up games that I've played throughout my life, Streets of Rage, Final Fight, and such. You kind of know where I'm going with this. So I really enjoy, and I really like the music for this one. So most definitely I will continue to listen to the music for Double Dragon Neon, because damn, it really felt nice, almost like mellow. And almost kind of, I would say a tad or a pinch of synthwave to it. So I really like this one. And I listened to a podcast called The Mariachi Brothers. I know I've been recommending it before, but I'm kind of recommending it now again. And they picked up actually Jake Kaufman's soundtracks for the Mighty Switch Force 1 and 2. For the latest episode, not the latest episode, but the latest one I listened to, because I'm going back into the backlog and listening through everything from newest to oldest right now. So it's super interesting going through and like making a podcast about Jake while I've listened to a podcast about Jake right before. So I'm kind of, I would say I'm excited right now. I'm really excited. But yeah, we're dragging this excitement a little bit back again for the last song for this week. And I'm sorry if I have to do this to you guys, for you who know about this song and who have played the game. So I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. But this one is just too freaking good to pass. So do enjoy When Everything's Alright from To the Moon.
Short steps, deep breath, everything is alright. Chin up, I can't step into the spotlight. She said, I'm sad, somehow without any words. I just stood there, searching for an answer. When this world is no more, the moon is all we'll see. I'll ask you to fly away with me until the stars all fall down. They empty from the sky, but I don't mind if you're with me, then everything's alright.
I usually refrain from swearing in this podcast, but when it comes to this song, I really must, because holy fuck! This soundtrack for this game and picking it up for this episode, it made me so emotional, because when it comes to the Moon, it's an absolutely amazing game. Even though it's kind of short, sweet, on an emotional level, this game is so beautiful. I enjoy everything in this game, all the way from all the hard stuff that happens in it, to all the humorous kind of nudges and bits and pieces that you find throughout the game. Because it has a well kind of balance between them, and just knowing how the game goes out, I mean, to this soundtrack, Everything's Alright, is insane. So yeah, as I just said, this was Everything's Alright from the game To the Moon. So this song was also written and composed by the American-born Japanese girl Laura Shigehara. Many of you might know her very well because she has an amazing voice. But the full soundtrack was also composed together with the Canadian Kan Gao. The game, it was developed by the Canadian studio Freebird Games, and the game was released back in 2011 on PC. And many ports followed thereafter for all these years to come, so to speak. So it followed up on Macintosh, Linux, Android, iPad, iPhone, and even for the Nintendo Switch, which had its release last year. Very early in the last year, was in January already. So if you guys haven't played this game already, I highly recommend this game. Don't expect it to be like super easy and you're just blowing through. Just enjoy, take everything in, and go around and explore and enjoy this game to full extent. Because the more you kind of incorporate yourself into this game, the more you will feel in the end of this game. So when you're kind of done with the game, you start kind of looking back at it, you will start getting emotional, because how much this game has touched you, unless you're a ice cold person. I mean, every person I've heard play this game has always felt something. And I know when I played this game, I kind of feel like I'm a little bit too focused to kind of ice cold sometimes, but even I, at the end of this game, crying was so freaking close to me. I had it in my throat and it was choking me up. And it was so beautiful right there at the end. It was magic. It was magic. But when it comes to this soundtrack and this game specifically, To the Moon, I'm actually surprised that we have never had an episode that we featured any song from To the Moon before. Because the soundtrack is absolutely magical. Laura Shigehara did an amazing work here. And her voice is just pure magic to me. She's so sincere, so emotional when it just comes to her singing. I can feel kind of not the depression or something like that, but you can almost feel the emotional touch within this song. And when you're listening to the song for Zombies in Your Lawn, that is the last song from Plants vs. Zombies, not Planets, Plants vs. Zombies. You can hear her song there, and it feels so much more upbeat and kind of happy for some reason. And here, it kind of back forth. It's like yin and yang here. We're going from white to black, and it's so good. It's so freaking good. So when it comes to Laura here, she is most known for her work with music and vocals for the game Plants vs. Zombies, as she plays that little cute sunflower right at the end there. But her first work was not the music for Plants vs. Zombies. It was actually one game before that. And her first work was actually for the game Mahjong Tales, Ancient Wisdom, which was released back in 2008. Laura almost worked on a game that released each and every year, which is super interesting to see as well. Some composers that have worked on a lot of games either release many of them the same year and then have like a oasis of no games, and then 2 or 3 years later they're releasing a new big one and stuff like that. But when it comes to Laura, she has worked on games that almost released each and every year for her. And after To the Moon, which was the second game, she worked on music for Plant vs. Zombies 2 and Garden Warfare. Garden Warfare is the Plant vs. Zombies, so that's why I didn't say that, but now I said it anyway. And these games were released back in 2012 and 2014. And then she worked on Super Meat Boy back in 2015. And she has even worked on a track for Toby Fox in his game Deltarune Chapter 1. And the song there is named Don't Forget. And she actually just used her voices for that, so she didn't work on the composing soundtrack as well by herself there, because Toby Fox is working a lot by himself as this one-man army for these type of games. But Deltarune was released back in 2018 and can be found for free on Toby Fox's homepage, so you can play the first chapter. I actually do not know about the upcoming chapters as well there, so I'm a little bit unsure. But when it comes to Laura, her latest game that she worked on was for the game Dunk Lords, which was released last year. And looking at Kan here, he's an interesting fellow. He's a little bit one-in-all developer, one-man army-ish kind of thing, a little bit like Toby Fox here. So when it comes to his list of compositions, is almost all games that I worked on was through Freebird Games, and there's one other game in his credit list. So other than To the Moon, we have a bird story that released back in 2014, which was also a Freebird game, which kind of followed up on To the Moon, the kind of same-esque kind of thing, but it was not a sequel or anything like that. It's just kind of the same kind of emotional story, so to speak. Then he worked on The Last Word, which were not developed by Freebird Games, which was released in 2015. And the latest release from Freebird Games is the Finding Paradise that was released back in 2017. And from what I can see on their page, they don't have anything official that they're working on something new. So I'm a little bit unsure what Kan is working on today. But when it comes to the Moon, I really love this game because basically the story of it, this is set in the future, and in the future there's a company that basically can alter one's mind to fulfill your greatest wish. So we're basically taking control of these two doctors that basically are going to this dying man, and his greatest wish was to go to the moon, which is also the title of the game. So you're basically just helping out an old man dying by giving him his greatest wish. And it's something beautiful, just straight there. It's something beautiful. They're altering his mind to be able to go to the moon and experience that. But there's so much more going on in this old man's life, and you're taking part in this journey in this game. So for multiple reasons, you need to go into the depth of his brain and understand everything. And while you're there interacting with all the different things in this old man's life, you're getting bits and glimpses all the time from his life and all the hardships he has been through. And this is the emotional journey you're doing in this game. And the game is played top down, so you're walking around and everything. And I just love this game so much. It was so freaking good. I know I can't replay this one for a long time, but I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend everybody. I hope you'll understand how much I like it, and that maybe you will give it a try at least. It's like $12 on the stores right now. Maybe or maybe it's cheaper on Steam or something like that. But I know the Switch version is $12. Or something around there. It might be regional prices as well, so maybe it's a little bit more, a little bit less, I don't know. But yeah, these were the 4 soundtracks that we were talked about today, and then 4 songs that we'll listen to today. So yeah, a little bit type of ending here. I don't know what to say really, but as you guys might have noticed, I've done the 3 latest episodes here on English, and this was basically to have some weeks at least to kind of gather information from some international listeners. And if you're an international listener somewhere that is not speaking Swedish or understanding Swedish, I would very much like for you to reach out to me and say that you enjoyed and that you would keep listening to this podcast, that you enjoyed it in some way or some extent. Because when it comes to this and to this podcast, I actually want to go more international with it, but currently I'm getting more pressure from my Swedish audience that they rather would like to hear it on Swedish again, much more, or comparing to the voices of my international listeners. I know there have been a little bit of a bump for international listeners, but I'm still getting more and more people from the Swedish part. So I would very much enjoy to hear that you like the podcast and that you want to keep listening to it. Because if we get a lot more people, not maybe a lot, but if I have some sort of crowd that wants to listen to this podcast in English, then I will of course continue to do this podcast in English. So other episodes, if you're interested to getting to more, if this is your first one, then other episodes can be found on our homepage, Videospelsklubben.se. There will be a link in the post for this episode, so if you want to just go there, you will find it there. You can also find this podcast on Spotify or in your closest podcast app. So if you're running a little bit more of a specific podcast app and you can't find the podcast there, feel free to just message me and I will try to get it up on that podcast app as well. And also feel free to give a follow and comment on one of my social medias here. It's either Facebook or Instagram, and just search for Äntligen Spelmusik, the Swedish word for finally game music. And everything is in the comments and everything, so feel free to just copy paste these and get to know me through my Instagram accounts and Facebook. I usually do some smaller updates with new compositions that got released and everything, so it's a good way for you guys to kind of follow up what's happening. I can't really follow with everything, so I really love when people are reaching out to me, composers specifically, when they're reaching out with new game music that gets released in any type of form where you can support the composers themselves. Then feel free to just reach out to me and we'll get it down and public for more people to see. So if you want your name to be heard within one of these episodes, then either request a song for an upcoming episode by commenting on any of the social pages or through our Discord server. And you'll find the link on videospelsklubben.se. You can also support this podcast for future content, quality updates and everything. But also, when I'm done collecting money for what I need, when I feel I have good quality with everything here, then everything will go back into future composers that are still struggling getting their name out there. So it's not just a support for me, it's also support for future composers. All the money won't go to me. I don't need money. I just want this podcast to be something magical and something we kind of spread forward as a community towards the composers that are working so hard with the video games they all make music to. So yeah, become a Patreon. That's basically what I'm saying. Become a Patreon and support this podcast. I would love to have more Patreons, because currently we have 2, but these are 2 amazing persons that support this podcast. So the first one we have is a long one going. It's Mikael Sjöberg. Thank you so much for supporting. And also Andreas Nilsson. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast. Links to where you can either buy or support these composers behind the music will be found in our main post on Videospelsklubben.se. And for the next episode, or the next thematic for the next episode, will be a composer-specific episode. And we're going in on a high note here, because we're going in for Yuzo Koshiro. And with that said, I do hope everyone out there have a great weekend, do take care, and see you all next time.